Though the White House has rescinded that memo that freezed federal aid, local and state governments are still waiting to see the full effects of President Trump's executive actions, including that one. Former Democratic governor from Washington, Jay Inslee, joins us now on set in Studio 57. Governor, thank you for being here. So we just heard the report from Olivia that even though this is the rescinding of a memo, it doesn't necessarily mean that all programs would be safe, that the Trump administration is going to be looking at all programs that receive federal funding with a fine-toothed comb. What does this mean for work that governors do, for the aid that people in states do? And even, does the rescinding still make it difficult for governors to sort of figure out who is affected and manage the fallout?
Well, there's still chaos about this because these people are they couldn't run a two-car funeral, what they have done to our federal government. At least we could have some competence. All they did was create mass chaos. I think there's some good news and bad news here. The good news is that we forced Donald Trump to back down. The millions of voices who were raised by this outrage from many, many quarters forced him to back down. And that's important because we got to understand that the forces of resistance, when we stand up on our hind legs, we can force him to back down. That's what happened in this case. The bad news is he'll be back with some of their absurd proposal.
You had mentioned chaos. Is that part of the goal here, to just drop so many policies? I mean, and Governor, he campaigned on fundamentally changing government, shaking things up, being a change maker. Isn't this what voters put in office?
No, nobody voted for him to roll a grenade into our nonprofit groups that protect domestic violence people. Nobody voted for him to shut down our Meals on Wheels, where veterans get food. Nobody voted to
for
stop
smaller government.
Nobody voted for him to stop helping people in North Carolina who were victims of hurricanes, or people in California and fire. Nobody voted for that. What this was a massive effort to continue his corruption scheme of making sure that he takes care of his friends in the fossil fuel industry, for one thing. One of the things you can count on him to continue to do is to attack the clean energy companies that are now putting people to work all across the country, developing less expensive, cleaner sources of energy for us, so that he continue to pad the pockets of his buddies in the oil and gas industry. He'll continue on that. That's why we need to continue to speak up.
I know that's one of your passion projects. If we have time, we'll return back to that. But you mentioned disaster funding. The president has said that he wants to potentially give states the power to disperse their own disaster aid funding, overhaul, even get rid of FEMA altogether. You had a dispute with him back in 2020. Politico reported that Trump withheld $37 million in aid from Washington state in wildfire funding because of a personal dispute. Is it your opinion then, would you support the idea of sending funding back to the states so you don't have to wait for the federal government?
I support funding for the states, but he refused it to give to the states or anybody. I had a whole little town, Malden, Washington, burned down a couple years ago. The post office, the fire engines all burned up. And all we asked for him to do is to do his job, which is to send the emergency allocation to us so that we could distribute it to the people of Malden. He refused to do that just out of sort of pique at me, frankly. And even the Republican congressmen were begging him to just take his foot off the oxygen for the people in this town. He refused to do it. He doesn't care about us. He doesn't care about our citizens. He only cares about power and being vindictive, as he has been in so many different ways.
Do you believe that FEMA needs to be overhauled, or are you happy with the way the program currently runs?
You can always make reforms in every agency, but I have found FEMA to be a very effective organization when I worked with it. We ought to keep it. It's helping people across the country, and all he wants to do is destroy it so that he can have more power. That's what this is about.
Well, former Democratic governor from Washington, Jay Inslee, thank you for your
You
time.
bet.